Hi, it's Justin from Chronicles of EMS with another 60-second life-saving tip brought to you by Zoll Medical. Zoll would like me to remind you of the importance of adequate CPR chest compressions in life-saving practices. Sudden cardiac arrest isn't just something that happens to the elderly population. Folks younger and younger are falling ill. If you see someone collapse and they have no breathing and no pulse, call for help but begin CPR immediately. 100 compressions per minute are recommended. Push hard, push fast. The life you save could be mine. Until next time, this is Justin from Chronicles of EMS. All right, let's do it. Gentlemen, welcome. Seat at the table. We're here at Proper Television Studio in San Jose, California. We're going to be talking about some issues. We've got our, of course, the chat room has a seat at the table.
Filling up very quickly.
Filling up very quickly. As usual, Justin Shore from Chronicles of EMS, American paramedic.
Mark Glencourse, Chronicles of EMS from the UK.
And I'm John Cloutier, Marketing Manager for Zoll Medical Corporation.
Welcome, John. Now, everybody knows Zoll is a big sponsor of Chronicles of EMS. They've been very supportive of us since before they knew what was going on. And you guys reached out to us, and we reached out to you because we want to know not necessarily what's coming, but kind of what the manufacturers are thinking in the equipment they're giving us. And we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and talk to us. So
It's been a great partnership with you guys so far.
yeah,
Likewise.
yeah. And we hope to keep it going. But my service, for full disclosure, San Francisco Fire does use Zoll, and I've got a 1600 first out on my engine right now. M-Series is a backup. The E-Series is your new product. A lot of new features available on it. What's one of the big selling points on why a system should use the Zoll E-Series?
So we've come a long way from the 1600 to the E-Series, and technology's kind of evolved to where we are today. It's much more data-centric and more patient-centric with the biometrics that we have in the E-Series, right? So we started out back in the day with just paddles and 3-lead monitoring, but really we've come a long way in terms of the ability to monitor for 12-lead EKG for STEMIs, pulse oximetry, and most recently carbon monoxide and methemoglobin. But all of that aside, where we're really taking off and kind of setting ourselves ahead is in the CPR technology world. I mean, our focus is cardiac resuscitation. So the technologies and the capabilities that we're putting into the E-Series have kind of leapt us over the competition in some ways. So it's not enough just to have a defibrillator anymore. You know, cardiac arrests, more than half of them present in a non-shockable rhythm. So we need to have tools to help you with the resuscitation and take you beyond just the shock. Right? And I think we're all very good at what we do in EMS, and we've had some pretty good outcomes. Some, you may have had a cardiac arrest, code save, and take them off to the hospital, and they've died a couple days later, usually from one of two things: either encephalopathy from brain swelling from being anoxic for so long, right, or pump failure. Right? Because we've defibrillated, and defibrillation just isn't enough. So we need to give you the tools to prep the heart satisfactorily in order to get a positive result back. And so what we're doing at Zoll is creating tools and technologies to help you as the professional rescuers and even the lay rescuers to respond quickly and favorably for the benefit of the patient.
And we just saw in the chat room someone said CPR feedback for the win. That's huge.
That's huge.
Especially since we're hearing from AHA we weren't doing it good enough, we weren't doing it fast enough or hard enough. And a lot of times you'll still see videos, you'll go to scenes where people are doing 1 and 2, and no, we got to pick it up, we got to go faster. Is the solution better training our people, or is the solution putting another gadget on the monitor to track that, or is it a combination of the two?
That's a good question. Depends on who you ask. Right?
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look at some of the certifying agencies whose interest is in training, they're going to tell you training is the answer. And training is, I think, half of the problem. I can sit here and train you to ventilate somebody 20 times a minute, but in the heat of the moment, you get excited. What do? We end up hyperventilating them, hyperoxygenating them. So training is part of it. I can train you to do good CPR, but in the heat of the moment, what's important is to have real-time feedback to give you instantaneous results on your performance. Say, what we know clearly is that we're all, and admittedly, we're all very good at what we do, and we're all very proud, right? I am. I think I'm very good at doing compressions. But the truth is, in the heat of the moment, I probably pressed too fast, and I get tired like everybody else. And with rescuer fatigue, you tend not to do full recoil or decompression. And so we know that we need to press hard, press fast, reduce or minimize or eliminate interruptions, as well as the full recoil. And so whether I train you or not, I also think we need to give you the tools in order to assess how you're doing, if you're pressing hard, pressing fast, and interrupting compressions, as well as giving you information on your respiratory status as well.
It almost seems a bit of a paradox in a way, in that as CPR is getting simpler and simpler, compared to what we've been taught and what's happening with the HA over here, and that will be coming over to the UK soon. We're moving away from more and more complicated CPR to press hard, press fast. But to allow us to do things simpler, then the technology's evolving to help us do it easier, more simple. And there's the two things running side by side. And I can see the benefit of the additional stuff coming in to tell us about how to do things properly, and that's really good. But I find it, CPR we keep on getting told every time there's a new update, we've been doing it wrong, we need to do it this way now, and we've been doing it wrong, we need to do it this way now. And now with all the stuff that's coming on about oxygen therapy and how we do more harm with good, with free radicals and things, we're getting simpler and simpler and simpler, but we still require the technology to be there to help us perform the simple tasks right. We still don't get that right sometimes.
Certainly.
Well, how much of a lot of this change, though, is the industry just keeping their finger, bad analogy, on the pulse of what's going on? But it seems like AHA needs to sell books every 3 to 5 years, so why not change the requirements so they can sell books? If they came out and said, guess what, 100 compressions a minute is the gold standard, it's saving lives, keep it, then what's their purpose going to be? There's organizations giving free CPR classes to high school kids. Just where I am in Contra Costa County on my emergency medical care committee, my local EMS committee, we heard about some folks got together and went to the high schools and taught kids how to do chest compressions, because we've got high school kids dying of sudden cardiac arrest. Yet there's still this stigma attached to CPR in the public that, I didn't take the class, I didn't get the card. Shouldn't we be starting to focus on just making CPR so easy for the public to use that maybe the one thing that's saving lives, which is early intervention, will actually start getting done? And then we can come along with some great bells and whistles on our monitors and our equipment to keep it going well. And just talking about changing the standards, can we finally decide that one way is working and stick with it for more than 3 or 5 years at a time?
Well, maybe. I mean, in all fairness, I understand your point about selling books, but I think in fairness, you have to realize EMS is still very young, relatively young, and we've really migrated to an evidence-based science, or an evidence-based field. So the evidence is evolving daily and yearly. So every year, every 5 years, when the guidelines change, it's as the result of looking at evidence or science that's emerged in the previous 5 years to that.
Yeah.
So I would say it's an evolution thing. When we started, we were giving bicarb for everything and beryllium, and then it was monophasic, then biphasic, and the science just changes, right? So you have to kind of have to be open-minded in the sense that you're right. We do seem to go in these circuitous routes sometimes in treatments and therapies, but there's a reason.
Yeah, and we have, as providers, we need to put some trust into the people who are doing the trials and who are doing the things to guide us in how we should be doing it.
Sure, and it's not a bad thing to question why, right? I mean, you should always be asking why.
I'll never do anything if someone just tells me to do it.
Right.
I want to know why I need to change.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's part science and part art. So the artist in us, we need to take these tools and as long as they're in order for the patient's benefit, right, for better patient outcomes as well as crew safety, I think we're all on the right page.
I mean, the chat room, just after talking about CPR, the chat room's jumped in and talking about the auto pulse as well, and how you've got the two things going hand in hand.
Sure.
Again, making the simple tasks, just the cardiac compressions. Yeah. Obviously, there's products coming out from all companies who are trying to do that, and certainly myself, working either by myself on a rapid response car or just with a emergency care support worker, they're called in the UK. I think it's like an EMT basic over here.
Sure.
And we need all the help we can to do the basics right, and that's where we look to the companies to help us with that.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about mechanical devices, there are a couple of them out on the market today. And I think if you take it from a 30,000-foot view rather than just about the specific device, if you look at the whole purpose and intent of these things, if we can increase the efficacy of our compressions, I mean, the whole goal of EMS is to provide adequate treatment to the patient, to restore pulses and deliver a viable patient to the ER, to the hospital, where that they can then manage the patient, produce a patient with a good outcome. That's the goal. So if our goal is to produce a viable patient to the emergency department, and our whole purpose of doing manual compressions is to circulate volume in order to restore the heart and perfuse the vital organs, if I can do that with a mechanical device, while at the same time providing a mechanism to allow for you folks in the back of the medic units to be secured, and I know, we can talk about safety. The reality of buckling yourself in may or may not be reality, but that's where we should be going, towards crew safety, patient efficacy, freeing up a set of hands. And I think no matter if you have 20 guys and gals on scene, rotating doing compressions versus a sole rescuer, you cannot do effective compressions while you're moving the patient. Okay, so if we can put any of these mechanical devices on a patient that provides for better circulation and crew safety as well as continuous compressions, and do the physiological things that you and I can't possibly do. I mean, think about, and anybody who's listening, in your own professional lives, think about how many times you've been on a cardiac arrest when you're using end-tidal CO2, doing manual CPR. How often are you able to get normal CO2 or near normal CO2 values? Right? Because
I couldn't tell you that.
because you don't.
I don't have it. I want it, but I haven't got it yet.
Okay, well, if
Working on that.
yeah, I mean, I think CO2 is one of the end-tidal CO2 or capnography is one of the most valuable tools.
This is wonderful.
Yeah. In order to get CO2, blood must be going round and round, and air must be going in and out. Okay, so a good indicator of good CPR and good return of spontaneous circulation, use your capnography. Right? So when you think about your cardiac arrests, what are your normal CO2 values that you're generating doing manual compressions as opposed to these mechanical devices? Right? So if these things are circulating better blood flow and you're able to move air in and out and you're assuring better patient care and crew safety, isn't that a win-win for everybody?
Absolutely, until we arrive at the hospital.
That's right.
And all of our fantastic things that help us get a viable patient to the hospital are removed. We tested a product in San Francisco, and it worked fantastically until we arrived at the ER, and they said, "What is this? Take it off, turn it off, get rid of it." And then we would have to take over manual CPR in the emergency department, then get pushed away because they were, the standards seem to kind of get to us first and then kind of filter into the hospitals. We would be doing manual CPR, get pushed away, and say, "We've got this," and then there would be no chest compressions going on. So in your mind, how can we get the hospitals on board with accepting this new technology that's coming in pre-hospital? Is that something that the manufacturers are doing? Is not only bringing in doctors in to talk about the reason it's going to work and how it's going to work, but trying to get other doctors on board with, hey, this stuff works when they bring it in, here's how it works?
So, I mean, that's a great point. And I think we have gone so long in our industry of putting things in silos, right? EMS does their thing, the ER does another, the cath labs. And I think, to go back to your point earlier, is it an education thing or is it a product thing or what? And I think in this case, we need to start approaching things and continue to approach it as a system. So when you're involved, when you're as an EMS organization looking to purchase capital equipment like defibrillators and manual compression devices, any of these things, you should have representation from the hospital on that committee. And it's an education thing. I think in that case, whichever device you evaluated, I don't know which it is, and I don't think it's important in this conversation, but if that hospital, the emergency department, was involved in that evaluation process, I think the results would be different. And what we find when we're out educating our customer base, we're all constantly involving the emergency departments. In my mind, they're an extension of the EMS system. So why shouldn't they be involved? Not just for cardiac resuscitation, but for STEMI and for other cases.
Yeah.
Can I be devil's advocate? Which is something that's it's talked about and mooted about a lot anyway. And what he said is, why are we transporting patients doing CPR anyway?
That's a great question.
So when we talk about all of the technology and the equipment that's coming to help us and making it lightweight, transportable, and continuing on to the ER, then the other side of it being devil's advocate is, do we need to have that capability in our equipment, or do we just need the capability to work on the patient in the home, and if you get a pulse back, then you transport? Because I know there's a lot of talk about going on, if you do ALS in the house for 20 minutes and you don't have return of spontaneous circulation, then you call it. So
yeah, I mean, You're right, and I think that that's a big topic of discussion right now is, do we transport patients who are in active cardiac arrest? Right? And so there's a couple schools of thought. One is you resuscitate them on scene. If you don't get any favorable results, you terminate the resuscitative efforts on scene. If you get a return of spontaneous circulation, then you transport. Then, when you dissect that, when you transport, do we even need to go lights and siren anymore? If the patient's undergoing resuscitative efforts, they're having compressions done, why compromise the safety of the public and your crews, right? So I think, I'm of one camp, and I think what we need to do is approach this from a system standpoint. Again, what happens in San Francisco fire is vastly different than what happens in a very rural organization, in a very rural environment. So I'm not sure a one-size-fits-all protocol in that sense works. I think
it definitely needs to be community-based, because every community is going to be different.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. But there is a big discussion going on.
I've never seen the chat room so active. It's hard to keep.
But there is a big discussion going on about this. I can't remember where the video is. Maybe someone in the chat room can help us find the link of the study they did where they were doing CPR in the back of an ambulance and they had a camera mounted there. And it showed them doing it and they were getting rocked around. And it turned out the ambulance was just going in circles in a parking lot.
That was Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. So they did that with a demonstration of the auto pulse. And it was very effective, right? And it bothers me to no end that here we are, 2010, and our brothers and sisters and you guys are still standing up doing compressions in the back of a Code 3 lights and siren ambulance, barreling down city streets and curvy rural roads in the middle of winter doing this.